to the What Are We Doing Phillies podcast interview series. Today's guest is Mark Mullelly, Plymouth Whitemarsh High School social studies teacher.
Well, it's been a little bit more than what we have done previously, and these been every week, and then Thanksgiving happened, and I was only in school for 2 days, so can't really do that. And I was going to do one on that Tuesday, but I'm like, I just want to go home. I want to go home. I don't need to be here any longer. But today we have our first December guest, my 8th grade history teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Even though we're in the high school now, and now he teaches high school.
Yeah, yep. Moved up. I got bumped up to the big show, as they would say. I got bumped up to the high school and just enjoying being with the high school students. So glad to see Kevin in the hallways again after a year or two of missing him.
Yeah. So as I like to have started with these, I've had D'Onofrio on here, I've had Mr. Monero on here, I've had Mr. Culp, and the first question I kind of ask people is, how did you first start? What's your first baseball moment, or how do you what made you start liking baseball?
Yeah,
or sports in general.
Yeah,
mainly baseball, Phillies,
Yeah, baseball was the first sport that I really loved. I had both my grandfathers were big Phillies fans. My grandfather Mullelly, my dad's dad, he was diehard Phillies fan. I mean, I from as young as I can remember, he was taking me down to the vet, and we're talking late 80s, which were not a good time for the Phillies. He'd take us down to the vet, and while they weren't winning a lot of games, just being with my grandfather, my dad, sometimes my Uncle Tom would come, just having those experiences. You'd leave the vet, especially for a night game, and they would, spoil me. They'd take me down to the Melrose Diner down in South Philadelphia and get some Danish and some late night food. And, as a 6 and 7 and 8-year-old, those were I thought I was pretty cool hanging out with the older guys in the family and hanging out at the Melrose Diner. So that was it. And then the tipping point, for me, and probably a lot of kids of my age, there's 1993 Phillies. I was 10 years old. The Phillies, hadn't been good. Mike Schmidt had retired, and all of a sudden they come out and they jump on the Braves. They build up this great lead in NL, and I just fell in love. I think we went to 27 games that season, and as a 10-year-old,
that's crazy.
That was my summer, and of course going into the fall and the World Series there. So those were my earliest memories. So good memories.
Yeah, that's something, and then just kind of blends into what my first topic idea was. Is you watch games and you go to games and you watch games with on the TV, in person, on the radio, and all these different facets of the game. And then here now we have this big thing that broke, I think the week of Thanksgiving, was the new TV deal info for everyone. And I'm going to run over some of the highlights quick, and then we'll get some opinions on it, because I am, in the biggest definition to everyone who listens to this podcast or knows me, I'm a complete old soul for everyone who knows me at all. So I am not with the people that, I love everything streaming. No, I'm a good, turn on the cable channel and let's get it going here. I don't need all these other things. And starting now, to watch all 162 games, you need NBC Sports Philadelphia, which I have. And I think if you are a Phillies fan, you have that channel. Then you have NBC. NBC is going to be a baseball carrier this year. ESPN, Fox, FS1, Apple, which I hate so much, and Netflix, which is a very strange one. I never thought that was going to happen. But, I hate Apple. The Apple stuff is me and my grandfather. We talk about it all the time. The Apple stuff is the absolute worst games, because that's the one we don't have.
Yep.
That's the one, you have Netflix, we have Hulu, we have all these other things. HBO, we don't have Apple. We're not going to spend the extra just to watch a baseball game.
Yeah. It's hard. I see both sides. And Kevin, I'm just like you. I grew up at a time where you could watch every Phillies game for free. You watch every game. You watch for free.
Just have a satellite.
Yeah, and and it was beautiful. I went to watch the Phillies. You put the Phillies on, and it was as simple as that. with the birth of the streaming apps, and not just baseball, but with all the sports, you have to have almost a dozen apps to be able to watch the teams and the leagues that you really enjoy. But I do get the other side. These the players, as you get Shohei Ohtani getting a $700 million contract. These teams need the money, and they're gonna search for the best deal or deals, plural, if it's all the streaming apps. And if that's gonna be the way they bring in money to pay the players that you want to have these great teams, then unfortunately that might be the sacrifice. But Kevin, I'm with you. I'm old school. I'd like to put on one channel, watch the Phillies, or if I'm driving down the shore, put on the radio and listen to the game. And that's how I like it.
So there's two things with the streaming games that I get the most frustrated with. Number one, the streaming game is actually slightly delayed, which is very frustrating if you're watching and you have a social life and you talk to people.
Yeah.
Or you call people. Say for me, it's more I'm on the calling my friend or my grandfather on the house phone or whatever, and I'm talking to them. And they then say, oh, you're 35 seconds, you're 4 pitches ahead of me. How possibly can it be different on the two different sites? It doesn't make sense. You cannot, the streaming stuff, if they're going to do it, it cannot be delayed. It cannot be delayed house to house.
Yeah.
Which is really annoying.
Yeah. And my experience, not only do you have the delay, but with the sporting events I've watched on streaming apps, there's also connection issues, and maybe none other than the Mike Tyson fight. The most recent Mike Tyson fight, probably live, we had it, we were watching it, probably live, I watched a couple minutes of it. The rest were delayed, was breaking up.
That was on Netflix, right?
Yeah, and that was on Netflix. And I've had issues with Amazon watching Eagles games. The reality is the streaming apps, I don't think are fully prepared for live events. I think they are
that many people to watch live events.
Yes,
yeah.
And the bigger the game, especially you have maybe a divisional game, a Braves game, a Mets game late in the season, and then you're trusting the streaming app to be ready for that. I don't think they're there yet, and I think that's been proven over some of the bigger events they've had.
Yeah, and the final thing that I think was streaming, and then I'll get off of this, but the final thing with streaming that is annoying is I'm a big fan of having multiple things going on at once on the TV. So you press the last button or the other one, and some people have that set up where they just change the input really quick, but I don't have the patience or time to figure out that. I just want to press the last button or the little arrow on the Xfinity remote, come up with 4 different channels that I want to flip to, another baseball game, Seinfeld, something else to put on in the background when I'm annoyed or it's in a commercial break, because I have a mental clock. I know it's 2 minutes, but that's 2 minutes I don't want to spend sitting there watching commercials. So there's many problems with the streaming thing. Luckily, it's not every game, and luckily we haven't got there yet. I'm happy. It's probably going to come at some point, but we're not there yet. So.
Yeah. And it's been a long time coming. I remember being a little kid, and the Flyers games would be on Prism. Well, Prism was kind of like a high-end subscription, and I remember having family members that were bigger Flyers fans than I was, but they'd be frustrated because they'd miss a couple Flyers games every season because of Prism. But now I think obviously streaming has replaced that, and we're having the same problems.
What's always funny is people get frustrated. Oh, I'm missing this game. I waited my whole life. There's 162 games in the season.
Yeah.
If you really think about it in context, you're only missing 3 or 4 of the games because they're on stream, like the Apple ones. But sometimes the Apple ones are most frustrating. It's a Friday, my week is done, and I need a streaming service.
Yeah.
Why?
And again, the problem, and you have a good team like the Phillies, and obviously other good teams they get put there, and those are games that might be the games. Out of the 162 games, those might be the few games that I'd love to sit down and watch this game, or there's this pitching matchup that I'd like to watch. And there's that frustration there that maybe those handful of games that you might miss might be the games that you were kind of looking forward to.
Yeah. So not only with the streaming service, couple notes from that. Number one, for Netflix's case, they will take the Field of Dreams game that the Phillies will play.
Yeah.
In Minnesota. I'm against Minnesota.
Yeah. In Iowa, yeah.
That'll be nice. Just in context, that'll be a fun game for the Phillies to play in.
Yeah.
It's been a few years since they did that. Did they do it last year?
I think this is the third year.
I didn't pay attention to it last year. I remember watching the first one with Tim Anderson hitting a walk-off home run. Man, he fell off a cliff.
Yeah. I'll tell you I right now I don't have Netflix. But I'll probably find my way to somebody's couch or a restaurant that is carrying it. That Field of Dreams game, we talk about early 90s movies. You have Field of Dreams, Angels in the Outfield, Rookie of the Year, all these great baseball movies. And that movie for me, was maybe one of the best of them, that Major League maybe. And so it's really exciting to think that the Phillies are going to be playing in the cornfield there in Iowa.
Hopefully with a decent chance to win in the month of August against a not so great Twins team, as my friend Caleb knows very well, as our resident Twins fan of the podcast.
The Twins do more with less than maybe anybody but the Brewers, and they make it work.
Yeah, well, right now the whole fan base is telling them to fire their own. We're not. I'm not exactly as knowledgeable on the Twins, so I'll let Caleb deal with that. One of the bigger things for people that are going to watch the games are the change of Sunday Night Baseball where it is placed. Sunday Night Baseball will now take place on NBC, and NBC will be launching a new cable channel and streaming app called NBC Sports Network. Used to be a thing, they got rid of it, and now it's coming back. That will be where also some random games throughout the year will be on that channel. I think this is a decent move. ESPN, those announcers drive me nuts, so at least we're finally getting some new guys. I don't like Karl Ravech. I don't like them. They're not. They annoy me. Maybe new presentation for baseball up there. The ESPN presentation. I always feel like the camera's darker. Watching an ESPN game. I don't know why. It shouldn't be that way. But the ESPN games, the camera is always a little bit darker. I'm like, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. Especially with the biggest sports network in the world. Yeah. I agree. Sunday Night Baseball, I remember Harold Reynolds and all, I don't know. It seemed like it lost some of its luster, so maybe this would be a positive move for them.
And getting back on NBC, again on a channel where anyone can watch.
Yep.
If you have a satellite, you can watch it.
Yep.
So anyone can watch NBC, not anyone can watch ESPN.
Yeah.
So that's a big move for them. They're trying to do that with NBA. Their goal, after reading the website, their goal is to have a game on Sunday night every single Sunday of the year for NBA, NFL, and baseball. Yeah. Baseball and football will prioritize over basketball. That's what they said on there.
Okay. Yeah, I remember NBA on NBC was a big deal too. So
when that came back, that was a big deal. And when this come back, because this used to be a thing, they used to have baseball on NBC, and now I think Mike Tirico will have a hard life now. A lot of work for Mike Tirico.
Yeah, they're adding a little bit of a workload for him in the summer months.
Also, NBC will then take over the control of the wild card round of the playoffs. That has been held by ESPN for the last few years. Some random ones I'm going to fire off quickly. These matter for us because we're Philadelphia fans and the All-Star Game is in Philadelphia this year. So the Home Run Derby will be streamed on Netflix, which will be definitely a change, and I don't know if that's a welcome change. The All-Star Game will still be streamed on Fox. I don't think I wrote that down, but Fox will still hold the rights of the All-Star Game. The Futures Game will be streamed on NBC on July 12th. There'll be some special Sundays where they have full 18 slate of games all on the NBC networks, which will be an interesting thing to see. T-Mobile still gets their MLB TV for free. Grandpa, you'll be able to get your T-Mobile MLB TV. That will end, and they're going to merge the ESPN app and the MLB app together for the MLB TV subscription starting in 2027. So you have one more year of the MLB app, but then they're going to merge because this whole thing is a partnership with the with Disney Company and MLB. Yeah. Okay. That was the whole partnership that happened. So a lot of random news. The Roku games will all go to Peacock. Those 11:15 Sunday morning games. Those games will go over to Peacock. ESPN will still carry baseball games. They will take place 30 weeknight games during the year. So probably you'll still get one Karl Ravech game per team, or maybe more if you're the Dodgers or the Blue Jays or the Phillies probably. And I think that's about it with all these. There was a lot of moving parts in the streaming, and it just made sense to kind of go over that because in a way, some people might see, oh, it's a positive. I don't have to watch so noticing here, TBS lost games during the rest of the year. Now, playoffs will still stay on TBS, but they lost games during the year.
Yeah. Which
is something Tuesday night has been TBS for a long time.
Yeah.
So now that Bob Costas is gone, even though he was very biased to the Yankees while doing those broadcasts in the playoffs, or like the Dodgers moment where he said is a horrendous night for that man. I'm like, that is not what you're supposed to say in a national broadcast.
National broadcasters, Dodgers and Yankees get their favor,
Yeah, they do. So with that being over with, and there's a lot of stuff there, and we'll talk about that when we get closer to the regular season. There's Phillies news and there's normal baseball news. So as we've been doing it, I go over the baseball news around the league first, and then we'll get to the Phillies news to wrap everything up because winter meetings are coming up.
Oh yeah,
for baseball. That's on the
couple weeks, right?
Yeah, I think it ends on the 10th. I think I read by the end of the 10th.
Yeah.
So we're not far away. I think it's next weekend, in the middle of next week. Before that has happened, I have not talked since a couple pitchers have signed, and I have some passionate opinions about almost every one of these. I've watched most of these guys a lot, and the teams that they signed with, I do not agree with. So number one, Dylan Cease, 7 years, $210 million. Okay, we're going to start here. Dylan Cease does not deserve that much money. Dylan Cease is not as good of a pitcher as it's more money and years than Blake Snell got.
Yeah.
Blake Snell deserves a lot of money. I cannot count dude had a 4.55 ERA last season, and you go out there and you give him 7 years, 210. That must be you're desperate. Then you're wondering, what does Framer Valdez get for his contract if this is the money you're giving to Dylan Cease?
Yeah.
That's how these minor market teams are going to be completely out of these contracts.
Yeah, and it's the same across sports. That starting pitching. Teams that lack depth, especially the Blue Jays. They have the bats. They have the ability to get deep into the postseason, as they just shown. They want an arm, and in a lot of ways, eating up those innings, which is increasingly becoming hard to get in Major League Baseball. Aaron Nola, I think in a lot of ways his contract was a product of he eats up a lot of innings. And
doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, he doesn't get hurt until this year. He eats up a lot of innings. He has his years with the low 3 ERA, and he has his years with the 4 ERA. But he eats up the innings. He's reliable starter, and I think that's what the Blue Jays saw here. Yeah, somebody that can eat up the innings.
Yeah, so the Blue Jays saw that here in 2024. He had a 3.57 ERA and 189 innings. He's been around. I'm a Phillies fan first, and I'm a Padres fan. We watch a ton of Padres games, so I've watched a ton of this guy pitch and a ton of aggravated innings of watching him pitch. He's not the greatest pitcher. His record, and we didn't put the win-loss record on here because that doesn't really matter that much in baseball at this point. But they don't win much when he's on the mound. He was not a guy that you're like watching last year being like, yay, Dylan Cease is on the mound. I get to see this start. That's not who I wanted to see on the mound for the Padres, and they're losing a bunch of pitching. If I was doing a Padres podcast, that would be sign someone, please, because your starting pitcher's like 3 years too old, and this is going down the wrong rabbit hole. So Dylan Cease leaves, goes to Toronto. Toronto trying to bolster their pitching, which they need to after the Max Scherzer is probably not going to pitch a full season if he's even back with the team. Yeah, like if that was one of the guys they were relying on, they need more pitching. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think in modern Major League Baseball, that person, as I said, that can eat up those innings, especially in late March, April, May, June. I mean, those guys might be able to save you from those injuries, from guys, they can also maybe save your bullpen, bullpens now in the playoffs have become increasingly important. If you can lay off the innings on some of those bullpen guys until September, October, it might be that contract ended up being worth it in some ways.
So then just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago, Devin Williams signed with the New York Mets. 3 years, $51 million. Devin Williams was an absolute disaster last year with the New York Yankees. And there's a couple things you can put to that. And he's pitched his entire career. His career ERA is a 2.45, 465 strikeouts, 1.04 whip. Last year, he went 62 innings with a 4.79 ERA and only 90 strikeouts and not a great whip either.
Yeah.
When he pitched for the Milwaukee Brewers, there's a couple things different from pitching with the Brewers and pitching with the New York Yankees.
Absolutely.
There's a few major differences. Pitching in a unbelievable sport fan environment, or people care, like you're a lot more people on you, and a lot that doesn't get talked about in stats, that never gets brought up, that can you go out there and can you pitch in the moment with this type of team, all these people on your back, and the second you fail, you're getting yourself booed off the mound, which is not something that might happen as much in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Because Milwaukee is just not as big of a sports town. It's not to criticize the Milwaukee fans at all, but it's to say that it's just not as much pressure as it is. So if you leave the Yankees where you struggled and you didn't really get to settle in, and you go to a team with even more expectations right now than the New York Yankees, probably because of all the people they keep signing, and they keep coming up short. So the expectations are like, okay, is this going to be the team to get over the hump? The trade for Marcus Semien, getting rid of Brandon Nimmo, like, is this the thing that's going to get them over the hump? So he has so much pressure, especially if they don't re-sign Edwin Diaz. Now, for Phillies fan point of view, I'm like, thank you for doing this. Hopefully he struggles. I don't want to see Edwin Diaz back with the Mets. Don't go to the Dodgers. That's another problem for another day. But like, if this is their answer for a closer, then I'll take that.
Yeah, and
and he could be great. He could be great.
And therein lies, the classic, relief pitcher. The Mets are getting him this contract. They're looking, last year was a blip on the radar, but here are his career numbers, and they're relying on that. Now for Williams himself, I think the one thing he has to keep in mind is, he went to a crosstown rival. Well, you're in town. Those fans are familiar with you, and if they kind of see those troubles emerging again this year quickly, they're going to be on. They read the same newspaper, the same websites, and the Mets fans might not give you that long leash that you might have had if you went elsewhere out of the New York metro area, and so. For him, yes, big expectations, Mets and some of his contract and the Mets is, they throw money at whoever they can get, and they hope they can put together a team. And fortunately for the Phillies, that has over the last 2 decades more so failed the Mets. They throw money at people. They put together these names, but they're not a team. They're not.
And I think I think that example is shown from what they've done with Devin Williams and what they did with Marcus Semien. Marcus Semien is not the same player he was years ago.
But he's a name. He's a name.
He's a name. Devin Williams is a name, and Devin Williams had a lot to live up to going to the New York Yankees because he's been like this all-time closer, and now he just wasn't, so that killed the Yankees back end of the bullpen.
Yep.
And now they go to the Mets where he might not be in that position, but then again, the Mets might be losing Diaz. They definitely lost Ryan Hesley, which we'll talk about in a second, and they're losing probably Tyler Rogers, or the side-armed righty guy that's really, really, really good. So I don't know what you're looking at in that bullpen. The Mets are a dysfunctional group of players 90% of the time, and they're good enough to get you 90-ish wins. Now, does that get you over the hump because you have Pete Alonso, who you also probably are losing?
Yeah, and I don't know. In my 30 plus years of watching Major League Baseball, the Mets, and they've had glimpses, and maybe famously the early 2000s glimpses with the Subway Series with the Yankees. Obviously, last year, they got ahead of the Phillies in the playoffs, but more often than not, they like shiny toys, but those toys don't end up working well together, and inevitably, you see collapses. And I've seen that maybe from the Mets more so than any other team over the last 20 years.
So speaking of a shiny toy that they are losing, who they really thought was a shiny toy and brought him in from the Cardinals and was an absolute disaster. Ryan Hesley last season put up with the Mets a 7.20 ERA.
Yeah.
Now, it's not on here because that was his whole season was a 4.5. But with the Mets, it was a
Mets.
7.20 ERA. He gets paid by the Baltimore Orioles $14 million per year for 2-year contract with the Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah.
If you are an Orioles fan, I am sorry you gave that much money to that guy. You cannot. Now, yes, he's not the level of, he's not as good as Devin Williams in his career. He's not as good as Edwin Diaz in his career. He has a career, almost 3 ERA career, and not really a good control pitcher.
No.
And you're filling it up with Felix Bautista, who's also not the greatest control pitcher of all time. So in a bullpen with a lot of power and not a lot of control against the Yankees and the Blue Jays as your opponents, that one scares me. He's the reason the Phillies made it through the playoffs in that first year, because he hit a bomb. He let a base hit to Segura and all the rest of the team and JT and all that, because he could not find the strike zone, and him in big moments has not gone well.
Yeah, and you almost feel for the Orioles. I think the last 2 or 3 years, they think they have the pieces in place. This last year ends up being a complete disaster for them. Failed to meet, even get close. Also. Injuries. And I think for the Orioles, they're in a difficult AL East. You got the Yankees who are always going to be there. They're going to spend. They're going to be there. And then, the Blue Jays, just, being the most recent World Series. I think the Orioles honestly thought they'd be in the Blue Jays' shoes right now. I think if you asked them 2 or 3 years ago, who's going to be the team in the AL East to rival the Yankees each and every year, I think the Orioles say, oh, that's gonna be us right there. And I think, not that this is a desperation move, but for the contract for the years, I think the Orioles are going to take a flyer here and see if they can maybe compete.
The interesting thing I see with Baltimore is I have a lot of young talent, and the young talent needs to do well. But I haven't spent a lot of money on the team to then be like, here's your veteran presence to do well on this team. So Tyler O'Neill, they spend money on, which that didn't really work out. Ryan Hesley, they're spending money. I don't know how that one's going to work out. But you probably need to spend money and put some power into some people that you're going to spend. And I'm going to go back to him in a second, because that's a really good segue to a Phillies moment. But I want to get 2 little things. Rodolfo Castro is finally away from the Phillies. That disastrous trade piece that we brought over the one time, who couldn't hit the backside of a barn if he tried.
Yep. And as they say, just a bit outside.
So now he's on the Blue Jays, so he'll probably go win a World Series, and that'll be entertaining. And Sonny Gray left the Cardinals and got signed with the Red Sox. That's the last big free agent move that happened. Probably when I do this podcast next week, we're going to be deep in the middle of the winter meetings on the 9th. My grandfather will be here. We'll have a lot of different moves to talk about, but this is the last one of all of these. Sonny Gray, last year, a 4.28 ERA, a career 3.85 in 23. It was one of his best years with a 2.79. He's a good pitcher. He's an okay pitcher, and they need pitching. Yeah. They don't know what they're going to get from Brian Bello. They don't know what they're going to get from some of these other guys, but they know they have Crochet, and now they know they have Sonny Gray. Yeah,
and I think Sonny Gray, I feel like his name in free agency is around all the time. I mean,
if it's a trade, if it's a free agent move,
if it's trade deadline, I feel like his name has been floated for like a decade. But I think for the Red Sox here, again, I think Kevin, you said it great. He's shown flashes of brilliance. He's not a great pitcher. I think for the Red Sox, if he can sit somewhere their 3rd or 4th arm, maybe they think they then have at least some of the pieces that go out and compete in that, incredibly difficult AL East. So, again, not a great pitcher, but I think serviceable arm, and, he'll be all right.
So talking about those last 2 teams, Baltimore and the Red Sox, that brings a great segue into the Kyle Schwarber conversation, which we are all having very closely as the 5 team, or the teams listed on this list. Phillies remain the favorite as of Jeff Passan and John Heyman's reports. The teams behind them, I'm just going to list them all, and then I have real reasons why there should be no reason why some of these teams should be listed on this list, and some reasons why they should be there. So Mets, of course, Reds, hometown. Red Sox makes sense. He played there before. Baltimore, they need a, money. We were just
Veteran.
saying that money presence, winning presence. Need that. And the Pittsburgh Pirates, sure. They need money. I don't know why he would sign a contract with the Pittsburgh Pirates. I don't know what you're going at with that one, because you need so much more than just a Kyle Schwarber to get you over the hump if you're Pittsburgh.
I think
for hitters.
I think for Pittsburgh it boils down to, are they showing Paul that they're signing anyone? And you get a guy, 50 plus home runs, RBIs, veteran presence in the clubhouse, a great veteran presence by all accounts,
wins
a leader,
everywhere he goes.
wins everywhere he goes. Is loved everywhere he goes. I mean, by the clubhouse and the fans. And I think for the Pirates, it might not be so much building a complete team as, hey, Paul, look what we brought you. Look, we're trying. We're putting in the effort. We're spending money. Again, Kevin, I would agree with you. I think the Pirates need more than a DH. But I think for them,
in the field at all.
Yeah, I really do think it's almost a, hey, Paul, we're trying. Please don't.
I think
find your way out of this.
I think they might sign someone in the offseason and something to make it seem like, because they have the pitching, they just need a little bit more offense.
Yeah.
They have the pitching. Same with Cincinnati, and in Cincinnati's case, if they were to put some big contract out there for Kyle Schwarber, hometown is in Cincinnati.
Yep.
That just makes you're an older player. Not really on the back end of your career at this point, because he's been so well and kind of reformed himself. But going to a team of Cincinnati who is desperate for a person who knows how to win.
Yeah.
Now they have a manager who knows how to win, but they don't have any young players who really have I'm not saying they don't have the will to win, but they don't have that will of winning before.
Yeah. And I think, looking at that list, I think the Orioles, the Reds, and certainly the Pirates, probably more so than any of them. I think, they're trying to make some earth-shattering moves. I think Schwarber is of course probably one, amongst the top two names in free agency. And I think, for the Orioles, it's a veteran presence, another big bat if the youngsters can kind of stay healthy. I think for the Pirates, it's really just please, Paul, stay in here. And I think for the Reds,
don't go to the Yankees.
Yeah, don't go to the Yankees. And I think for the Reds, it's hopefully that hometown discount guy that's, honestly is in the last 4 years probably the best 4-year stretch of his career, but is in the twilight. He is getting to those. This is going to be his last big contract. Maybe get him home. But I part of that hometown deal, I often in the last decade, the Mike, it brings up for me comparisons of the Mike Trout. Bring him home. Bring the guy home. I don't think Mike ever wanted to come home. I think he had maybe a chance before his last big signing. I don't think he wanted it.
He also didn't seem like he really wanted to win.
Yeah, and
which was strange.
Yeah,
he was fine with where his career put him.
Yeah,
for some reason, and most people couldn't really understand that at all.
Oh, I struggled. Before his last big contract, I mean, he was the guy, and I thought, oh, he's coming home. He's gonna want to play.
He'll go anywhere but the Angels.
Yeah, and
just across town.
Yeah,
the Dodgers.
Sometimes the hometown discount, like your birth hometown, the town you grew up in. Sometimes I think that's overplayed a little bit. I don't know if the Phillies give him the contract that he kind of wants in the ballpark. I think he stays. If the Mets go above and beyond, I think he goes. Unfortunately,
I think the top 3 teams in this have to be the Mets, the Phillies, and the Red Sox.
Yeah,
Boston has had him before.
Yep.
He played for the Red Sox, and he brought them to the playoffs. Because when does he not go to a team and bring them to the playoffs? The Mets case, would that really hurt my soul? Yes. But is that exactly what the Mets need? Yes. Probably a person who knows how to win is pretty much exactly what the Mets need, not some hodgepodge mess of guys that have won before-ish in their lifetime.
And I think it boils down to the Red Sox, Phillies, maybe a dark horse team out there that we maybe aren't hearing about.
Yankees and Dodgers are probably the Dodgers can't look at it because they have Ohtani, but I think the Yankees probably look at it.
They look at it. I just there is something with the Mets. I don't think he goes to the Mets. I think the Phillies have the money. that they'll give him ballpark what the Mets are going to give him. And I honestly can't see him leaving our clubhouse and walking into the Mets clubhouse and being okay with it. I just don't think he's, and maybe, maybe I'm wrong here, but if the Phillies are in the ballpark with the Mets and it's Mets Phillies, I think he stays with the Phillies. Now, the Red Sox obviously has some familiarity.
I really always thought that the Washington Nationals would have been that other team that they would have thought about,
brought him,
just because of that team of the Nets. They had Soto, they had that whole group. He's won there. They are like on the verge. They're young. They're very young, but that's like the veteran presence. You're getting older.
Yeah.
You're trying to be this mentor to these guys. That's the team that I would see. They're not in this conversation.
But they
really,
could be the dark,
They could be the dark horse.
Yeah.
I think that's your dark horse team as a team, as just putting it out there for Nationals fans. They know what I mean.
Yeah, and a guy with the numbers he's put up over the last and just this year obviously exceptional, but the last 4 years probably one of the better power bats in the league, if not top 2 or 3. I do think there's going to be dark horse teams that they might throw him an offer and maybe somebody comes up with the ability to sign him away. So hopefully he stays with the Phils, but we'll see.
The reason this is interesting is also because Jeff Passan said on his post that he believes that he'll be signed before the winter meetings end on the 10th. Kind of every free agency, we have that one domino that needs to fall to open everything up.
Open up the spending.
And open up the spending. Schwarber seems to be that guy that you're waiting to open up the spending. Ohtani was, of course, that guy.
Course.
Soto was that guy.
Yeah.
That you had to open up the spending, and then things started to just kind of happen. And that's just how it is. But I think that Schwarber deal will get done during those winter meetings. It could happen, hopefully, before I do my podcast on next week on Tuesday, which will be dead in the middle of the winter meetings.
And I think the Phillies would like to get it done before the winter meeting. If they are legitimately trying, I think the Phillies don't want to go into those winter meetings with those questions and those conversations and agents talking and whispering.
The TV conversations and Dombrowski's getting interviewed on the TV and Schwarber's still not signed.
Schwarber seems like he'd want to avoid a lot of that.
There's one thing we have to kind of talk about. If he does leave and go away, it has to be a conversation. What is your plan as the Phillies to fill the void of your power, your RBIs, your home run, all the home runs, all the RBIs, all the power, the presence? How is your hole to fill? Because Bryce Harper is not that person right now. No. He just is not. So you need some other bat. Is that bat Pete Alonso? I don't know.
I think if the Phillies can't get a deal done with Schwarber, and really I honestly think the Phillies sincerely want to get a deal done. Yeah. I think if a deal's not done, it's because Schwarber is blown away with somebody else's offer, and the Phillies just have to walk away. I do think it's Pete Alonso. It's and you're right. I wish it could be Bryce Harper, and especially with the years left on his contract, and what he has shown in the past.
He's asking for more money.
I really wish I could just say, you plug in. Maybe you give Bryce the DH spot, and keep you allow his career to go a little longer. Avoid the field, avoid throwing and fielding. I just don't think he's that player. And as much as I would like to think he can maybe return, I think he's still going to be a good player, not a great player. And I don't think you're going to get the 40 home runs, the 120 RBIs. And I think Pete Alonso, you give him a 2-year contract. The money, obviously, from Schwarber's gone, and maybe some others that we'll probably talk about here. I think you give Pete Alonso 2 years. You tell him, hey, here's 2 years, be our DH, 40 home runs, we'll be happy.
Yeah. So that's just I hope that doesn't happen. I hope we're not sitting here in a few weeks and I'm sitting here talking to people and I'm mourning the loss of Schwarbaum in my life. But
I think it happens quick though. I think if Schwarber does walk, I think it would be very quickly. It would be turned to Pete Alonso. Yeah. And again, with the money that you might be saving, instead of a 4-year contract with Schwarber, you say to Alonso, give us 2. Here's a solid amount of money.
So you mentioned a few people that might be leaving or coming back. JT Realmuto also is a free agent. We have 2 big names that are big free agents. JT is getting looked at by Boston. There has not been another team really said in the mix that much. They don't have anything special. I think Danny Jansen is still their catcher. They don't have anything special. I've had conversations with people about Realmuto. My thing more at this point is if he goes, I don't know what your plan at catcher is. I have no idea what your plan at catcher possibly is, because Marshawn and Stubbs combined are just not literally going to cut it. No. They're not going to cut it. JT's your 5 or 6 hitter in your lineup. You're losing that. You're not going to find that anywhere else. I don't know if you're trading with the Rockies, maybe for that Hunter Goodman catcher or something like that, but that's a massive loss. But
then you're giving up assets, and that's a whole nother.
I don't think people are talking about as much about how much that could hurt if you lose him.
Yeah, and the JT situation, look, for the Phillies, it's an unfortunate situation. You don't have anybody kind of waiting in the wings that's capable. Catcher depth in Major League Baseball right now anyway is pretty weak. I mean, there's just not a lot of names out there.
Martin Maldonado has been around the block enough to know that it's pretty weak.
Yeah, and for JT, the Phillies are in a difficult position. He's an aging player. Unfortunately, a diminishing player, at least at the plate a little bit. He showed flashes this season. He had some good stretches, but I think the Phillies are in a difficult position, if not JT, who, and I think because of that,
is why he probably
you resign him. Yeah, and you're probably going to have to maybe give him that extra year or a little bit of extra money that maybe you wouldn't want to have given him if there was other options, but there's no other options. And I think you're right. Marshawn is just he's not every right and he hasn't proven that he's every day, and he's not going to provide. And credit to JT, he works well with you look at the Phillies starting pitching staff and Luzardo and Sanchez and what they've been able to do since they've come here to the Phillies, and you got to give, while they certainly earn most of the credit, you got to give, hey, JT's their catcher, and you got to give, he's a play caller, he's your quarterback back there behind the plate, and he's that old school catcher that's calling games, and while maybe the plate isn't what he was 4 or 5 years ago,
even the defense as a catcher is not
there, but he's still your quarterback or general behind the plate, and he has the respect of those pitchers. And look, there's a reason the pitchers starting staff was so good. I mean, some of those guys struggled when they were elsewhere. They came here and they've settled down.
The pitching, one thing anyone that's heard these podcasts has heard me say, I almost put him as a more important re-sign than Kyle Schwarber in a way of the controlling of the pitching staff. I've said this since the get-go that he is unbelievably important and will be direly missed if you are not able to bring him back to this team.
And it really harkens back to Carlos Ruiz. When Ruiz's bat was, first of all, never like JT's. He had his moments, but he wasn't a JT bat. But man, he could call game, and he had the trust of his pitchers, and he was maybe just as more important behind the plate than he was batting at the plate. So
as we all know, Zach Wheeler doesn't really like with anyone else catching him, so that might be another big thing. Your biggest pitcher struggles when other catchers are behind the plate, so maybe put that into. He also doesn't look like he's going to demand more than a 2-year contract. It's probably not going to be that much money. He knows the market is out there. It's not huge for a catcher right now. The catcher depth after Adley Rutschman came up, there's really not that many young catchers out there either.
Yeah,
and it's this rotating random thing, like the guy that went to Freddie Fermin, like he's a rotating catcher. Those are the type of guys. We're not seeing these bright young catchers like JT, like Will Smith coming up right now.
And who are playing 6 games a week. Maybe the Sunday day game they avoid. But I think JT and the Phillies are both in a position that they need each other, and I think they'll get something done. I don't think there's many options for the Phillies, and I think JT, there's not a lot of teams out there hunting him down,
which helps the Phil's market.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's interesting. And then of course we've had the general conversation over the time of the players who leave, players that stay. So as we're getting closer and farther into this offseason, this question won't come up as much, but you're probably one of the last people I'll ask. What would you do in the offseason if you're the Phillies general manager? What would you do with the team?
I think, the two obvious, and I know I'm not the first one in here. I know Mr. Bob Culp was in here, but I do think the relationship with Castellanos turned toxic towards the end of the season, and if you're bringing back Rob Thompson, I think Castellanos is going to have to go. He's just not an everyday player for one reason or another for a team like the Phillies. Maybe he goes elsewhere and he gets to play every game, which is what he wants. I think the relationship soured. I think he wants out. I think the Phillies want him out. I think that's, how you manage that we'll see. I think Alec Boehm, very similar situation. I think maybe not as toxic as Castellanos, that relationship, as it's soured over the year. But I think Alec Boehm hasn't shown a ton of growth. And for some of the shortcomings, maturity, he's not a young player anymore. 4 years ago, he's like, oh, we got these young players, Bryson Stott and Alec Boehm.
Not normal to bench your third baseman in the playoffs. It's just not normal for attitude reasons to bench your third baseman in the playoffs.
Yeah, and
when he's one of your best hitters on the team,
yeah.
Which I fully supported you benching him because I was mad at him, but it's not normal.
No, and I think Boehm and Castellanos are gone. Now, how they manage that and how they do that, am I going to agree with every which way, every trade, or
no?
No. I think Ranger.
Didn't even mention that.
Man, I love Ranger, and when Ranger's on top of his game, when he's in his either first or second half of the season, there's no more cooler cat than Ranger Suarez on the mound. The back issues. He's going to get money, and I don't think it's going to be from the Phillies. I think he's going to get money from someone who sees his numbers, maybe doesn't look as much at the innings pitch, but looks at his numbers and says, yeah, let's give it to him. Who else we have? We have Suarez, we have Castellanos, we have Boehm.
Those are the big guys.
Yeah, those are the big guys. I think Suarez is gone.
Yeah, now...
I like him, but he's gone.
Yeah, they have young guys also.
Oh, yeah.
Andrew
and this
Painter.
is yes.
Andrew Painter, I've said this a bunch of times. They just got to go. They just got to try it. You just got to put him up here. You have to try it because you can't just keep rolling out there. He could be whatever, but you have Wheeler also. Most people don't look at this that much. That's not an easy injury.
No.
And you can't fully expect him to, whenever he does come back next year, as Monero brought this up when I had him here, that it's not an easy injury to just easily come back and recover from and be like, oh, I'm back now at the top of my game. So Sanchez is your number one right now.
Absolutely.
Until
especially
Wheeler
with Wheeler.
Back.
Yep.
And
you don't know what Wheeler's going to be when he gets back.
Correct. And Luzardo is there. Luzardo was good, but Luzardo was good last year.
Yeah.
He's not the best pitcher of all time.
No, he's
ever.
He's a 3. He's going to give you good games.
Then you drop. Then if you don't have anyone else, if you don't have Ranger Suarez,
come on, you got Aaron Nola.
Yeah, got it. Every other year, Aaron Nola.
Hey, well, if it's every other year, we are in good shape. We are in really good shape for 2026.
We better be,
because he had his worst year.
Yeah, so he's there, and then you have Andrew Painter, who hopefully should be good, and it was a rocky end in the minor leagues. If anyone followed his numbers, they were up in the 5s or. 5.40 ERA in 106 innings. It was not very good for him, but it was. Hopefully, it can be different. They better use him in spring training this year. They didn't even try it last year, which was beyond me.
Yeah,
ridiculous. I think just not even letting him pitch at all in spring training, holding him for the future. That didn't work.
Yeah, and the Phillies, and Kevin, I know you know this, but the Phillies have a history
bringing up guys too late.
Yes,
yep.
And when I was, Ryan Howard is maybe one of a great career, but a career that was so shortened because they Jim Thome was in front of him, and I think with the Phillies, they've just this history of being so hesitant and coming out with so many reasons not to bring players up. And I remember, 4 years ago, when they brought Stott and Boehm up, I was thankful. And look, it got him 4 straight playoff appearances. It got him a World Series run.
Almost a Gold Glove defensive
almost a Gold Glove
second baseman. He's one of the best defensive second basemen in baseball.
And I loved it because that was against the grain, the traditional Phillies values. Do not bring anybody up. And I will be honest with you, and Miller, Crawford, Painter. My hope, and my hope is all 3 should be starting from July on. I mean, I think Painter,
Miller,
Miller a little later.
Miller's a little different. Miller's the one that I've said, and people have heard this a million times. So I'm saying it again so you can hear it. I believe that they're going to keep Boehm around and get rid of Boehm at the deadline and bring Miller up to play.
Miller up. Yeah.
After that, get value back for Alec Boehm, young value. That's what I would do. He's in the last year of his contract. Yeah. Then you give Miller the minor league time, bring him up. And if he's
extends his contract.
If he's not great, he's not great, but it's you're probably getting better defense out of there. It's probably the smart thing to do. Because I don't think you want to bring an Alex Bregman in here, a Nolan Arenado in here when you're trying to bring up.
Yeah, and the Bregman, it's just, unfortunately though the Phillies have shown a willingness to do this.
Yes,
bring in the 34-year-old player
while your young guy sits there.
Yeah, and Kevin, I'll say this: if their plan is hold Bohm, gain some value through the season, trade him at the deadline, bring Miller up, I would be 100% for that. And the hope is that the Phillies are, going to be, a 92 win plus team, and that, that won't bother things. But I do want to see all three up. I think Painter, and again, and Coach Monero knows more than I do about baseball, and I'll never fake like I know more than him. But I would say this, if he's healthy, he should be told right now, go to his house and tell him you're starting. You're in the starting rotation. That's the expectation, and let that be. And if he's not healthy, obviously that changes the conversation. But I think Painter, I think you go Sanchez and Wheeler, and again, that's based on Wheeler's health. You got Luzardo, you got Nola, and I think you tell Painter.
Taijuan Walker.
You tell Painter, hey, Painter, you're 4 or 5. Depending on Wheeler's health.
Yeah.
And Taijuan, you're back in the bullpen, spot starts. But and again, that's all Painter's health. I mean, I don't want to say a guy, but if he's healthy, what are you waiting for? They've had kid gloves on him for a while, which is fine. But I think push comes to shove, and I think this year's you got to push.
Definitely there.
I think Crawford's got to be in the outfield. He's got to be there.
Name we didn't mention of guys you're probably losing is Harrison Bader.
Yeah.
And I think
you're losing him and Castellanos. I think
you're probably losing a lot of your outfield. Brandon Marsh not the greatest outfielder of all time.
No.
We've learned.
Although credit due.
Credit.
4 months of hitting.
Yeah.
Maybe
lefties.
let's forget.
Can't
Yeah.
hit lefties, but
I do think, at this point you got to bring up Crawford. Crawford. Bader is probably gone. I don't think we're going to match any contracts. I think Castellanos is gone. I think you say to Crawford, hey, you're starting.
Now, name that was brought up here that I forgot about is Rincones.
Yeah.
I'm
a little bit
bat, which is interesting. If you're not signing an outfielder, which I looked at that outfield list. There's nobody. On that list that I want. It's kind of like a Max Kepler type thing. There's nobody on that list that I want on this team. But say you get rid of those two guys in the outfield, you have Marsh, who cannot hit a lefty at all, which is a problem. You have Rincon, you have Crawford in center field. Then you now have an empty spot in the outfield, which could be filled by this kid Rincones, who had an 800 OPS in 18 home runs. He has a power bat.
Yeah,
lefty power bat. We saw it in spring training last year. He has
which for a corner outfielder,
which is what you need. Yeah, and young presence. And would it be an interesting step for the fan base to try to get into watching 4 young guys, or at least 2 young outfielders? One that's an unbelievable speed.
Yeah.
Yes, I think they will try to get Harrison Bader back here, though. I think they might try it.
Yeah, I think the Bader money might be a little bit more than we're willing to stomach. Especially he had a great stretch for us. I mean, he really came in and he had a stretch. Kevin, I'll be honest with you. As a 42-year-old that's been watching the Phillies for 35 years, I would love to see you have solid veterans and a Schwarber and Harper. If all that's intact, that veteran core's intact, put some young players around them, young players that are going to learn how to act and behave in a clubhouse and on a field, and give them their opportunity, and hopefully, they meld well, and you end up having another nice playoff run with maybe the injection of a little youth. And you go back to that run, the youth movement was a lot of the fun of watching that run. We had was watching those young guys, and
I love watching young guys.
And these are young guys that are highly, highly touted, more so than those
young guys that are young.
Yeah.
What a great concept.
Yeah, young guys
that are young,
but that are higher prospects than Bohm and Stott were. These are guys that are highly sought after prospects. I think they inject youth and ability. I think that's an important part of this.
Injecting youth is not what they've done the last. Kirkering is young.
Yeah.
Kirkering is young, but he's not the type of player like these guys that you would bring up. They're just going to get a bunch of people to go out to see Kirkering pitch. Like, that's not the type of guy.
No, you're seeing Painter pitch.
Otto Kemp came up as young, as people call young spirit. They think he's like 25. He's not young in the
Yeah.
young spirit. Weston Wilson, also, he's got a full-on beard.
Yeah.
He's not young. He doesn't have a baby
Well, Kevin,
face.
I had one in freshman year of high school.
But he doesn't have a baby face compared to, like, Trey Turner has a baby face. And
Yeah,
he knows how old he is.
Yeah.
But, like, just, it's funny, like, you have some kids that look like they're just the young kids on the scene, and Crawford plays the game that way. He's got the slap, he's got the, like, a lot of high ground ball rate, which is always the concern that everyone has with Crawford coming up. He has an insanely high ground ball rate. He beat out a lot of singles to raise that batting average in the minor leagues. Is he going to beat out the singles with a
Major league
Alex
arm.
Bregman at third base firing you out, or a Mark Vientos at third base firing you out?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? But I'd like to see the Phillies. You know, they have the veteran core. They have the clubhouse, the healthy clubhouse with those veterans. I think you got to give those young guys a little bit of a chance, especially when some of those spots with Castellanos and Bohm and Ranger Suarez probably walking. I think it's ripe time to bring in the young guys.
Yeah. So, and I think I hit everything on here. I filled out about the time period that I wanted to do this on. Any other last point that you wanted to final off with people?
No, I love that we ended with that conversation. You know, and you know, if you go back to the Wheeze kids in '83, even the '93 team, a lot of those guys were veteran guys that they brought over. You know, Dijkstra, you know, while he had some youth in him, he was on that '80s Mets runs. You know, I think you had that balance, and you had the Darren Dalton. He was older. People forget he was on the '83 team. Yeah. I think I am looking forward to what the Phillies do. I know a lot of people are, you know, after a couple quick exits out of the playoffs, the Phillies people are down on the Phillies. I think, you know, you bring back Schwarber, you bring back JT, and then you inject that youth, and I think you have an exciting team. You know, now playoff baseball is a whole different monster, but you got an exciting team that I think could get into the playoffs.
So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see where it goes. Thank you very much for joining me on this interview series edition.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin.
The next one, I will have my grandfather in studio with me on next week on Tuesday, and then my friend Brielle following that on the following Tuesday before we go off to winter break. So with that being said, I am Kevin Flannery. This was my teacher, Mr. Mullelly, and signing off. I'll see all of you next week.